Hello everyone and welcome back to the semifinals of the Aimchess US Rapid knockouts. It's Levon Aronian versus Magnus Carlsen, and the first match we didn't cover. They were fairly short draws, all 4 games. But now the second match is a lot more fighting going on. So already the first game is very enjoyable. Without further ado, let's check it out. Levon with the white pieces opens with e4. We have e5, knight to f3, and now knight to c6. And Levon goes for bishop to b5. The Ruy Lopez is on the board. We have a6 by Magnus, Morphy's defense, and now bishop to a4. We have knight to f6, and now castles. We have bishop to e7 and rook to e1. So nothing out of the ordinary here. We have b5, bishop to b3, and here Magnus just castles. And now if white were to proceed with something like c3, then we would play d5, go for the martial attack, and have a very enjoyable game. But Levon avoids this, being a martial player himself. He goes for a for the anti-martial variation. And it's interesting, Magnus, we covered, I think, 2 games where Magnus played the martial attack against the anti-martial and won. But we'll see what happens here. So here, bishop to b7, we have d3, and now rook to e8. So both players just continuing development, bishop to d2, and now b4. Later on, you can further strengthen the position with a5, bishop going to g5 now, and knight to a5, attacking the bishop and preparing to strike in the center with c5. So bishop to a2, of course, Levon doesn't want to give up his light square bishop, and now there are a couple of games where d5 was played right away, but Magnus plays h6 here, and it is now as of move 12 that we have a completely new game. So the bishop is attacked. You either capture it or move back. So bishop to h4, and now d6. We have knight b to d2. This knight is now coming, as usual, to f1 to e3, and then maybe d5, f5, depending on what black plays. We have c5, and now, while you could continue with that plan, first Levon trades this bishop for knight. So captures, and now knight to c4. And now if Magnus doesn't trade, then Levon is going to bring this knight to e3, and then again, d5 and f5 will be within its reach. So Magnus trades here. We have captures, and now just a5. So what do you do here? Well, it's a fairly close position. No pawns have been exchanged yet, so a knight will be able to, cruise around those pawns more freely than, for example, this dark square bishop, as all of Carlsen's pawns are on dark squares. So of course, he will try to utilize that. We have g3, g6, h4, and h5 now, so completely closing the position. And now knight to d2. Again, this knight is coming to f1 to e3, and so on. We have bishop to g7 by Magnus, knight to f1, and now bishop to h6. Now this bishop is put on this beautiful diagonal, and now it's a very useful bishop. So queen to f3, and now rook to f8. Queen to f3. Yes, okay, we're attacking the f7 pawn, but rook to f8 is definitely coming, and then we're just going to open up the f-file. So this is what Magnus plays. We have knight to e3, and now rook to a7. This other rook will now help out with the defense of the 7th rank, but we're gonna play king to g7, unpin here, play f5, and then at some point bring the other rook over to the f-file, if possible. So here we have knight to d5, with some ideas of maybe delivering knight to f6 check, but just king to g7. Now the queen and the king are guarding that f6 square, and you can finally play that f5 move. So rook to f1, and Magnus now executes f5. We have f5, e captures, rook captures, attacking the queen here, queen to e2, and now bishop to c6. Now the rook can also join the df file. We have rook a to e1, and now while you could capture this pawn, Levon allowed Magnus to capture this to try and get some counterplay, maybe with f4, but Magnus ignores it and he just plays queen to a8. Now with a double attack on this knight, and you can't really move the knight just anywhere. I mean, there's only the e3 square available to you. You could also defend it with queen to e4, and queen to e4, although really ugly, is probably the only move here for Levon. But he went back, knight to e3 also protects against bishop to g2, but now the position is completely lost for him, so feel free to pause the video and win the game for Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding this, well, just incredibly unpleasant move for the white queen. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is, of course, bishop to f3. And now you can see that Carlsen's bishop pair now is fully operational, and this queen really does not have a good square. Queen to d2 was played, but now just d5. With a tempo on the bishop, then d4 is coming, the knight will not be able to move, and that's it. So here you could try capturing this with check. It is possible, but it doesn't change anything. G captures and the queen is trapped. There's nowhere to go for the white queen. You're gonna have to block with the rook, and then we can even further attack the rook with the d4, and it's just, again, completely lost. So after d5, we have bishop to a2 by Levon. Now comes rook back to f8. There's always time. There's no way to unpin, so d4 is coming. Levon played c3, but still, just d4. There's no way to get out of this. C captures on d4, we have E captures on d4, and now queen to c2. Finally unpinning, but now we just capture the free knight. D captures on e3, F captures on e3, and now rook to c7, defending the pawn here. And, well, now Levon is just down a piece, and it will be very, very difficult to play this. Queen to c4 was played, but now bishop to g4. We have rook captures on f8, queen captures on f8, and now d4, starting to push this pawn. The pawn cannot capture as the rook on c7 would be hanging, but just king to h7, bringing the king to safety. Also bishop to g7 will be possible in the future. So e4 now, but bishop to g7, attacking the d4 pawn. And the problem is there's no good way to avoid this. If you could somehow get those pawns somehow off the board, then you would have compensation for the extra piece Magnus has. But here, if you try something like e5, then it's just queen to f3, and there's, well, all of this trouble is impossible to avoid. You would have to do something like this: trade queens, captures, and then we would just capture here, and that's it. e6, we would easily block this with rook to e7. There's no way to make any progress here. So after bishop to g7, we have rook to f1, attacking Carlsen's queen, but now bishop captures on d4 with check. King to g2, now comes queen to c8, going for bishop to h3 check. So rook to f7, delivering this check. Rook captures on f7, queen captures, but the king can just go to h7, or as Magnus played, bishop to g7. We have e5, trying to get that pass pawn up the board, but here Magnus just played queen to f5, and it was in this position on move 44 that Levon Aronian resigned the game. As there is nothing more to be done here. Problem is, if you capture, then there's no way to make any progress. If e6, we're just going to play bishop here or bishop here, and there's no way for this pawn to get across. And if not, after queen to f5, you could avoid the trade, let's say queen to d5, but then we just play queen to c2 with check, and now it doesn't matter what you do here. King to g1, now we could capture here, we could deliver this check, we could force a queen trade, so whatever we do is completely winning here. Magnus took a lead in the match by winning the first game with the black pieces, and then 2 games were drawn, and then Magnus again won in the last game. So Magnus won their second match, and with it the entire match, and will be facing someone I will not yet disclose who in the finals of the Aimchess US Rapid knockouts. So that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Aditya Parasarati, Christoph Alexander Sopa, Tom Deralo, CakeDeFi.com, and Vincent Natale for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this very nice event as we are going into the finals. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your weekend.